As the death toll mounts. Ukraine's leaders saying they're willing to negotiate with Russia, but it's unclear whether that will ever happen. Tonight, this warning at the UN.
We will not let atrocities slide.
The refugee crisis being created, hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians fleeing their homeland, the U.S. telling American citizens to get out of Ukraine, and now Russia. Tom Yamas on the ground in a shaken country. The wartime president, Vladimir Zelensky, tells his people to stand and fight. His rise from comedian to commander of a nation under siege. Also just breaking, New York State's mask mandate for school students finally set to end. And the new normal, our series about this new phase in the COVID pandemic.
Massive conventional military assault on Ukraine entered its fourth day with fighting in the streets of the country's second largest city. In a shocking move that immediately unearthed fears many thought permanently buried from the Cold War, Putin ordered Russian nuclear weapons prepared for increased readiness to launch, ratcheting up tensions with Europe and the United States over the conflict that is dangerously poised to expand beyond the former frontiers of the defunct Soviet Union. He said that leading NATO powers had made aggressive statements toward Russia in addition to stiff economic sanctions and cutting leading Russian banks from the SWIFT banking system. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky agreed to send a Ukrainian delegation to meet with Russian counterparts at an unspecified time and location on the Belarusian border. Those fleeing Europe's largest armed conflict since World War II grew to 368,000 Ukrainians, mostly women and children, who have reached neighboring countries, the United Nations Refugee Agency said. That figure more than doubles the agency's estimate from the day before. Ukrainians started preparing Molotov cocktails, also known as petrol bombs, in Kiev, amid fears of possible Russian intrusion into the city. Huge explosions lit up the sky early today near the capital, Kiev, where terrified residents hunkered down in homes, underground garages, and subway stations in anticipation of a full-scale Russian assault. Officials maintained a 39-hour curfew to keep people off the capital streets until Monday morning, complicating the task of assessing the intensity of the fighting.
As Russia continued to suffer, as Russian army experienced one defeat after another, the demands, the preconditions, the ultimatums by Russia were put aside, and now they convey the message to us that they just want to talk.
Looking now to Putin's own people, Russians in cities spanning from Moscow to Siberia have taken to the streets again today to protest Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Demonstrators marched in city centers chanting "No to War." In St. Petersburg, where dozens gathered in the city center, police in riot gear grabbed protesters and dragged some to police vans, even though the demonstration was peaceful. According to the OVD Info Rights group that tracks political arrests, by this afternoon, police detained at least 356 Russians in
Fighting over a child. God damn.
War demonstrations. This comes as a forceful reminder that the invasion of Ukraine is Putin's war, not Russia's. Turning domestically now, nearly half of
military as the death toll mounts. Ukraine's leaders saying they're willing to negotiate with Russia, but it's unclear whether that will ever happen. Tonight, this warning at the UN.
We will not let atrocities slide.
The refugee crisis being created, hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians fleeing their homeland, the U.S. telling American citizens to get out of Ukraine, and now Russia. Tom Yamas on the ground in a shaken country. The wartime president, Vladimir Zelensky, tells his people to stand and fight. His rise from comedian to commander of a nation under siege. Also just breaking, New York State's mask mandate for school students finally set to end. And the new normal, our series about this new phase in the COVID pandemic.
Ukraine's armed forces. Russia has claimed that its troops are targeting only Ukrainian military facilities and has said that Ukraine's civilian population is not in danger. The Russian Defense Ministry acknowledged on Sunday only that Russian soldiers have been killed and wounded, but they did not give out any numbers. And another call for peace in the region, this one from the Vatican. Today, Pope Francis urging those involved to put down their weapons. The Pope said he is heartbroken by what is happening in Ukraine, saying that those who make war do not think of the lives of the people, but instead they, quote, put partisan interests and power before everything. Pope Francis said it was not the will of God. He also urged Christians and non-Christians alike to make March 2nd, which is Ash Wednesday, a day of fasting and prayer for peace in Ukraine. 4 days into that Russian invasion, Alex Martiqua takes us inside the capital city of Kiev to take a closer look of how people there are preparing for the worst.
Ukraine's capital is bracing for the worst. Checkpoints with armed forces, sandbags stacked in front of the mayor's office in central Kyiv. There are no Russian forces in Kyiv right now, according to the mayor, but there have been battles against them. And the mayor says that large groups of Russian saboteurs were destroyed overnight. In the physical heart of Ukraine's 2014 revolution, the Maidan, the streets are deserted. And it was exactly here 8 years ago that Ukrainian citizens rose up against a pro-Russian government, a pro-Russian president, and ousted him. And that is something that President Putin has complained about for years. Now, his own forces are descending on this city, encircling it in order to try to topple this government and replace the president with a puppet who would answer to President Putin. Now, 4 days into this Russian invasion, there is mounting evidence of Russia's attempt to encircle this city, fighting in every direction around, plumes of smoke marking the areas of the most intense fighting. Living in this city these days is not for the faint-hearted. While we're out, right on cue, another deep boom breaks through the silence.
I'd be terrifying but cool.
I would.
I can see all of Georgia right now.
We're holding. That's not helping.
I know, I'm sorry.
What do you think?
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah?
Let's do it.
You want to do it?
Well, let's go.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be terrifying for me because I'm afraid of heights.
I'm
So
terrified of heights too.
it's so tough to know how something feels until you're there. I think it's a great idea. I'm doing good.
We have the judges coming up to join me.
All right, come on then. Oh my God.
Oh gosh.
Now I'm starting to understand.
If you can only feel my heart right now, oh my gosh, I can't look down.
I gotta tell you, Terry, I'm seeing this
It's a lot.
with very different eyes now.
Oh my goodness.
Come on up, family.
You are crazy.
Oh, isn't he crazy?
I wonder, God, this is terrifying.
Oh my gosh.
Come on
Hey,
up,
Terry.
Nikki. You got it.
This is a great perspective to see though. Holy cow, that is so steep.
I can't even look over.
My knees are shaking.
I'm nervous and I'm not doing the act.
All right, everybody in the crowd, I want to get a chant going. We're going to start it right now. Wheels, 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 wheels.
Are you sure you want to do this?
Wheels, here we go. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Oh my God. Christ almighty.
Unreal.
Yeah, that's crazy.
No, sorry. I think pit road's open. Yeah, come on, do it here.
Pit road is open.
Donald Trump praised Vladimir Putin moving troops into Ukraine, saying, "This is genius." Though "this is genius" is also how he sarcastically introduces Eric.
Ketanji Brown Jackson, seen here getting tired of y'all's foolishness, was nominated by President Biden to become the first black woman on the Supreme Court. The nomination fulfills Biden's promise to change the subject. You clapped too early.
Biden chose Jackson after interviewing 3 finalists this week. Weird, I thought interviewing black candidates was just for show, said the NFL.
A new book claims that while Donald Trump was president, White House staff routinely found wads of paper clogging the toilet. So either he tried to flush classified documents or he eats the wrappers.
Defense official believes Moscow has become frustrated at the lack of momentum and says the resistance they've faced so far is a lot greater than what they were expecting.
Vladimir Putin's background is in intelligence. This is an extraordinary intelligence failure on his part.
The anti-war coalition is working. Defensive weapons and equipment are arriving to Ukraine. We have almost unanimous support from the EU on cutting Russia from SWIFT.
Since the invasion began, the UN estimates more than 120,000 Ukrainians have already fled to neighboring countries.
Curfew in Kyiv is set to last through Monday morning, forced everyone inside, though the relative quiet of the capital was sporadically broken by gunfire. Russia claims its assault on Ukraine is aimed only at military targets, but bridges, schools, and residential neighborhoods have been hit since the invasion began Thursday with air and missile strikes. Ukraine's health minister reported today that 198 people, including 3 children, had been killed and more than 1,000 others have been wounded during Europe's largest land war since World War II. Putin has not disclosed his ultimate plans for Ukraine, but Western officials believe he is determined to overthrow Ukraine's government and replace it with a regime of his own, redrawing the map of Europe and reviving Moscow's Cold War era influence. With that being said, the global response and involvement in the crisis through aid to Ukraine and sanctions against Russia is still evolving.
Slamming into a Ukrainian apartment building, emergency services said 6 people were injured as a result. The mayor of Kyiv, who released this footage, said this apartment building is less than 2 miles from a commercial airport. A dramatic scene also unfolded in North Ukraine, where video shows a man jumping on a Russia tank. He rolls off before stepping back and kneeling in front of that tank. Others gather around, with one person pulling the kneeling man out of the way. The tank once again tries to move, but is stopped by another person before it revs forward and moves through. Some people compare this to the 1989 protests in Tiananmen Square, where a man stood in front of Chinese tanks. The Russian defense
political impotence that will only consolidate the Russian leadership and foment anti-Western feelings. He warned that Moscow could react to the sanctions by opting out of the last remaining nuclear arms pact, freezing Western assets, and cutting diplomatic ties with nations in the West. If Russia opts out of the agreement now, it will remove any checks on U.S. and Russian nuclear forces and raise new threats to global security. Medvedev said, quote, "There is no particular need in maintaining diplomatic relations. We may look at each other in binoculars and gun sights."
Necessarily without any caution, but you can afford to take more risks than you could have a month ago.
Other experts say this is not a sign for things to go back to normal. In fact, the CDC is urging those who are immune compromised or who will be around those to continue to exercise caution.
We can make it out of the summer without a surge. If we can make it through the holiday season without a surge, then I think that we're talking about putting this a little bit behind us.
Health experts say they will continue to study the data and new research to make sure that we are trending in the right direction. If not, they might revert back, but of course, they're hoping they won't have to do that.
Belief that elections have winners and losers and we all play by the same set of rules is exactly what's under attack. For example, take the Mesa County insider threat. A Republican county clerk decided to compromise voting equipment, risking the security of that county's elections.
Remembering now the 10-year
Rutledge. Try to give him confidence and cheer him up.
Wonderful way to do it.
Captain Buffalo! Captain Buffalo! Too bad we couldn't take all our way back for a real military funeral. Captain Buffalo!